Marcus Calloway was 39 years old, a structural engineer who had spent 14 years calculating load tolerances for buildings designed to outlast the people who commissioned them. He drove a 9-year-old truck he'd rebuilt himself over 2 winters. He wore the same work gloves until the seams gave out, then had them resoled by a cobbler 2 blocks from his office, who still charged $12 and always remembered his name. On a Wednesday evening in late March, he came home to find a letter on the kitchen table, not from his wife. From a law office in a city he had not visited in 7 years. The return address alone told him more than the letter would. He stood in the kitchen he had remodeled himself. Cabinets he'd hung level by hand, tile he'd laid over 3 consecutive weekends. And he read it twice. His daughter was alive. She was 7 years old. And she had been living 40 minutes away the entire time Denise had told him she never existed. What he did next would cost Denise everything she had built on top of that lie. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The coffee was ready at 5:31 in the morning. Marcus knew this without looking at the clock. He had set the same timer for 11 years, long enough that his body woke before it did. He drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood settle into the kind of quiet that only existed before anyone else was awake. That was when he did his best thinking. Not at a desk, not with a notebook. Standing, coffee in hand, watching the light change. He was the kind of man who measured twice before he cut anything. On a job site, that made him the engineer the contractors trusted with the problems they didn't want to put in the report. Off a job site, it made him the person his family called when something broke. His mother's porch steps, his cousin Darnell's electrical panel, his Aunt Celestine's water heater, which he had replaced in under 4 hours one Saturday when she called him at 7 a.m. without an apology. He had not expected one. He had met Denise Hargrove 8 years before the letter arrived. She was smart in the way that took up space in a room, the kind of intelligence that announced itself before she said anything. He had found that attractive. He had spent 6 years building a life around it. They had married in a ceremony of 47 people on a Saturday in October. He had written his vows by hand, twice, because the first draft had too many metaphors about construction, and his mother had told him, gently, to try again. He had laughed. He had tried again. He had meant every word of the second version. He did not know it then, could not have known, but she had already made the decision that would take 7 years to find its way back to him. She had made it in a hospital room 8 months into their marriage, in a conversation she had with no one but herself. And she had kept it the way people keep things they know cannot survive the light, carefully, completely, and at great cost. They were living in separate cities when she found out she was pregnant. He had taken a 14-month contract in Denver, a federal infrastructure project that had required his specific certification, and paid well enough that they had agreed, together, that it made financial sense. She stayed in Atlanta. They talked every night for the first 3 months. Every other night for the next 4, less after that. He had noticed the gaps the way he noticed structural irregularities, not with alarm, but with the quiet attention of a man who knows what a sound joint is supposed to feel like. When she told him she had lost the pregnancy, he had driven back to Atlanta in 11 hours. He had sat with her. He had said the right things, because he meant them. He had grieved something real. He had grieved it for 7 years. In the normal life between that call and the letter, there had been signs he had noticed and filed away the way he filed everything, quietly, without deciding yet what they meant. The way she stopped wanting to visit his family in the first year after Denver. The way she never mentioned the miscarriage again, not once, in any context. The way she used the word complicated when his Aunt Celestine asked, one Sunday dinner, whether they were planning to try again. He had chalked it up to grief. He had allowed her the privacy of it. That was what he did. That was his flaw. If it was a flaw, he extended trust past the evidence. Because he believed in people beyond what they had demonstrated they deserved. He had been wrong once before. He would not be wrong in the same way again. He read the letter 3 times at the kitchen table. The law office was representing a woman named Yolanda Tate, who had been the attending nurse the night Denise had delivered a healthy baby girl at Emory University Hospital on April 3rd, 7 years and 11 months ago. Yolanda Tate had left obstetrics the following year, had moved to Birmingham, had thought about this for a long time, had ultimately decided that the man on that birth certificate, Marcus Jerome Calloway, listed as the father without his knowledge, deserved to know his daughter existed. The child's name was Amara. She was 7 years old and lived with Denise and Denise's mother in a house in Decatur. She attended a magnet school that focused on science and mathematics. Her last standardized test scores had placed her in the 94th percentile for her age group. She liked building things. He read that last line again. He set the letter down with the same deliberate care he used for every tool he intended to pick up again. He looked out the window at the neighborhood he knew, the way he knew blueprints, intimately, structurally, without sentimentality. He did not call anyone that night. He did not call his mother. He did not call Darnell. He did not call Denise. He picked up the letter. He folded it in half, and in half again, and placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He went to bed at 11:43 p.m. He lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling he had skim-coated himself 2 years ago and thought about load tolerances, about what it took for a structure to hold under weight it was not designed to carry, about the difference between a building that failed because it was built wrong and a building that failed because someone had removed a support without telling the engineer. He thought about a 7-year-old girl in Decatur who liked building things. He slept 4 hours. 3 weeks earlier, before the letter, before any of this, he had run into Celestine at a family birthday party, and she had watched him across the room the way she watched things, precisely, without making it obvious. Celestine was 67. She had spent 29 years as a court clerk in Fulton County before she retired. She had a small, straight-backed posture that never quite relaxed, and silver hair she wore pinned up in the same style she had worn since before Marcus was born. She did not say unnecessary things. "How are you and Denise?" she had asked him when he passed through the kitchen. "She's well," he said. Celestine had looked at him for a moment longer than the answer required. Then she had said, "All right," and refilled his water glass and moved on. He had filed that away too. The length of the look, the specific way she had said all right. He called her the morning after the letter, 7:14 a.m. She answered on the second ring. "I need to talk to you," he said. "I know," she said. "Come over. I'll have something ready." He had not told her what the letter contained. She had not asked. Celestine's dining table was oak, and she kept it cleared except for a small plant near the window and the things she was currently working on. That morning, the things she was currently working on included a black composition notebook with a spiral binding, a manila folder, and a small stack of photographs held together with a rubber band. She set the notebook on the table first. She opened it to the first page. "Sit down," she said. Not unkindly. He sat. "I'm going to tell you what I saw," Celestine said, "and then I'm going to show you what I kept." She turned the notebook toward him. Neat, precise handwriting. Date, time, location, description. The first entry was dated April 9th, 6 days after Amara's birth. A notation. Denise Hargrove, 11:22 am, Piedmont Park entrance. Stroller, infant, approximate age, newborn. Below it, a photograph. Celestine, from what appeared to be a car window, at a distance that suggested she had not wanted to be seen. Denise with a stroller. The composition notebook had 23 entries across a span of 4 months. Then, a gap. Then, entries resuming the following year, when Celestine had apparently seen Denise at a school enrollment fair. Then, more gaps. Then, 2 months ago, a photograph of Denise picking up a child from a school Marcus recognized from a neighborhood he had driven through 100 times. He looked at the photographs one at a time. He did not say anything through the first 7. Then he reached the 8th. A clear image of a 7-year-old girl with his mother's eyes and his own chin. Wearing a red jacket and carrying a backpack covered in periodic table stickers. Something moved through him that was not anger. It was closer to what happened when you saw the full blueprint of a structure and finally understood why a particular section had been vibrating under load for years. The recognition of a system. The sudden understanding of how all the parts connected. He set the photograph down carefully. "How long have you known?" he said. "Since April 9th, Celestine said, 7 years ago." He looked at her. "I wanted to be sure," she said, "and I wanted you to be ready." He understood that. He did not agree with every part of it. He understood it. She reached over and refilled his coffee. He unfolded the letter from his jacket and placed it on the table beside the composition notebook. She read it without touching it, her glasses low on her nose. When she finished, she looked up. "Her name is Amara," he said. "I know," Celestine said. "I've been watching her grow up." He looked at the photograph again. The periodic table stickers on the backpack. The red jacket. His mother's eyes. He stood over the full spread of documents the way he stood over a set of blueprints on a job site, not reading any single piece, looking at all of it together, feeling where the lines connected. He could see the whole shape of it, not just what Denise had done, but what it had cost, and what it would take to correct it. He didn't move fast. That was the part she had never been able to account for. She had spent 8 years deciding what kind of man Marcus Calloway was. Dependable, quiet, steady in the way that sometimes looked like slowness to people who weren't paying attention. She had been right about the steadiness. She had been catastrophically wrong about what it meant. She had mistaken patience for the absence of capability. It wasn't. Patience was his most practiced skill. It was just the one she had never had reason to watch him use. He called his attorney, Walter Reeves, at 7 and the following Monday. Walter had been practicing family law for 24 years. He called early because he built while everyone else was still asleep, and he delivered information in the same voice regardless of how heavy it was. Marcus had used him twice before for smaller matters and had found him trustworthy in the specific way that meant he did not add drama to bad news. Walter listened to the summary without interrupting. Then he said, "Don't do anything yet." "I'm not planning to," Marcus said. "Good, come in Thursday. Bring everything." He brought everything. The composition notebook, the photographs, the letter from Yolanda Tate. The record Celestine had assembled, which included not just dates and sightings, but a timeline of every conversation she had witnessed between Denise and Marcus in the years following Denver. Conversations in which Denise had referenced the lost pregnancy, accepted his grief, and allowed him to mourn something she had chosen to conceal. Walter read through it for 22 minutes in silence. Then, he set his pen down. "She used your name on the birth certificate," he said. "Yes." That means she legally established your paternity without informing you. In Georgia, that creates obligations and rights simultaneously. The obligation is on you if she pursues child support. The right is yours if you pursue access. He paused. She may not have thought that through. She thought about a lot of things, Marcus said. She just didn't think about the ones that would matter later. Walter said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want?" Marcus had spent 2 weeks knowing exactly what he wanted and working backwards from it to make sure it was the correct thing to want. He wanted to know his daughter. He wanted the record corrected. Legally, structurally, in every way that a structure could be corrected. He wanted Denise to be held accountable not through punishment, but through the specific mechanism that her choices had made inevitable, the truth, documented and delivered by the right people to the right authorities. Everything she is legally entitled to receive, Marcus said. And everything I am legally entitled to receive. Nothing more. Walter nodded once. He uncapped his pen. Then, let's build the case. What Walter assembled over the following 6 weeks was methodical and complete. A forensic review of the birth certificate and hospital records, obtained through proper legal channels, confirmed that Marcus had been listed as the father on April 3rd, without his knowledge or presence. A review of Denise's financial records, accessible because she had, for 3 years after Denver, maintained a joint account with Marcus that she had never formally closed, revealed that she had received the state's Family Medical Assistance Program payments for a dependent child from 2018 through 2021, while simultaneously assuring Marcus in writing, in emails he had kept, that there was no child. He had not gone looking for the financial dimension. Walter had found it in the document trail the way you found a structural defect, not from the surface, but from reading the records that showed what the surface was hiding. She called him once, in the 4th week of the preparation. Her voice was measured and even. She said she had been thinking about reaching out. She said she thought they were both mature adults who could handle this without it getting complicated. She used the phrase "our situation" 3 times. He listened. He noted the speed with which she had moved from her opening softness to the practical framework. He noted the way she said "our situation" in a way that distributed the weight equally between them, as if they had built the situation together. He said, "I'll have Walter reach out." A beat of silence. Then, "Walter, my attorney." Another beat. "Longer, okay," she said. "That's fine. We can do it that way." He ended the call. Celestine was watching him from across the kitchen table. She had not said anything through the whole exchange. She sat with her mug, level and patient, the same way she had been patient for 7 years. "She thinks it's already over," Marcus said. Celestine said nothing. She refilled his coffee. Marcus arrived at the conference room on the 11th floor of Walter's building 35 minutes early. He liked it that way. On any job site, the engineer who arrived last was already behind. The room was long and neutral, pale walls, a rectangular table, nothing decorative. The city was visible through a window at the far end, flat and bright in the morning light. Marcus sat on the side facing the door. He placed his single folder on the table. He had brought only one. It had served its purpose already in Walter's office over 3 weeks of preparation. He had nothing to display. That was intentional. Walter arrived at 9:02, followed by a forensic document specialist named Patricia Hollis, who had spent 18 years working financial fraud cases before entering private practice. They arranged their materials without speaking. The room was quiet in the way that rooms go quiet when the people in them are ready. Denise came in at 9:11. Her attorney, a man named Carson with a practiced, neutral expression, came in behind her. They had come together, which was the first signal. She glanced at Marcus once, a quick professional assessment, a calibrated reading of the room, and then looked toward Walter as if Marcus were simply another party in a routine proceeding. Walter opened the meeting. "Thank you all for being here. Before any discussion of parenting access or other matters, there are several things that require formal acknowledgement." Carson had a legal pad. He clicked his pen. Denise had her hands flat on the table in front of her, controlled, prepared. She had done this before. Not this exactly, but something like it. She moved through formal proceedings the way people move through spaces they are confident they own. Walter opened his folder. He began placing documents on the table with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had done this work for 24 years. On April 3rd of this year, 7 years ago, Walter said, Imara Jasmine Calloway was born at Emory University Hospital, Atlanta, Georgia. Marcus Jerome Calloway was listed as the father on the birth certificate. He was not present. He was not informed. He was not asked. The first document landed on the table. The birth certificate, certified copy. Miss Hargrove represented to Mr. Calloway in the same month that the pregnancy had ended in miscarriage. We have those communications. They are in writing. Carson looked up from his legal pad. His expression had shifted slightly, not dramatically, but in the way that expressions shift when a professional realizes they are operating with less information than they believed they had. The second matter, Walter continued, involves a series of public benefit payments. Patricia Hollis placed a document on the table. A summary, organized by date, of the state medical assistance payments received on behalf of a dependent child. Payments made to Denise Hargrove between 2018 and 2021. Clean columns. Exact figures. $28,400 in aggregate across 3 years for a child the state was told she was raising alone. During this same period, Walter said, voice even, factual, without temperature, Mr. Calloway remained current on all marital financial obligations. He did not, because he could not, contribute to the support of his daughter. Because he did not know she existed. The room went still. Denise's hands on the table had not moved, but the effort it took to keep them still was visible to anyone watching closely enough. Marcus was watching closely enough. We want to be precise about what we are and are not placing before the court, Walter said. We are not today characterizing the benefit payments as fraud. What we are doing is disclosing that this documentation exists, that it has been preserved, and that it is directly material to any proceeding regarding parenting rights, access, and any future discussion of financial obligations. Carson looked at his client. It was brief. He looked back at the documents. We'll need a few minutes, he said. Of course, Walter said. Take what you need. Marcus stood. He gathered nothing from the table. He had brought one folder, and it had done its work. He buttoned his jacket. He shook Walter's hand. He shook Patricia Hollis's hand. He walked toward the door. He stopped in the doorway. He turned. Denise was looking at him. Not at Carson, not at the documents. At him. For the first time since she had walked into the room, she was looking at him directly. He said it quietly, only for her, not as performance. Because it was meant for her. You told me she didn't exist, he said. She does. She always did. And now so does everything you did to hide her. He walked out without looking back. It did not happen all at once. The legal process moved at the speed legal processes move, methodically, with dates and filings and waiting periods that measured time in weeks. Temporary access was granted within 2 months of the initial filing. A parenting plan was submitted 6 weeks after that. The benefit payment disclosures were referred to a separate administrative review that Marcus had been told, by Walter, not to follow too closely, because following it closely would not change the outcome and would only cost him energy he needed elsewhere. Denise's attorney negotiated. That was what Carson did. He negotiated. What he could not negotiate was the birth certificate, which was a matter of record. What he could not negotiate was the documented communications, which were a matter of evidence. What he could not negotiate was the 7-year gap in Marcus's relationship with his daughter, which was a matter of time that could not be recovered, only moved forward from. The house in Decatur, the one Denise had been living in, the one her mother had helped her purchase in 2019, had a mortgage. Without the stability of the arrangement she had expected to emerge from the settlement, the mortgage became something she was carrying alone in a way she had not accounted for. His business contacts had not been directed by Marcus. They had simply been honest people who knew what the documentation showed and who made reasonable decisions accordingly. She was not destroyed. She was reduced to the size of what she had actually built, which was smaller than she had believed, because she had built it on a foundation that wasn't hers. She was carrying the weight of what she had chosen the way a person carries something they cannot set down. Not dramatically, just constantly. Marcus was building something. He had taken on a private structural consulting practice 2 years before the letter arrived, a decision that had seemed simply practical at the time. His name was on the contracts. He had 6 people now, and a 7th starting in September. He answered every call the same day. He gave accurate timelines and hit them. His clients did not talk about him the way clients sometimes talked about engineers they liked. They talked about him the way people talked about infrastructure they trusted. Which is to say, they did not worry about it failing, and the absence of worry was itself a kind of praise. 14 months after the conference room on the 11th floor, Imara came to his house for the first weekend visit that stretched to 3 nights, because she had asked, with the directness of a 7-year-old who had decided something, if she could stay longer. She found the blueprints he kept rolled in a tube in his office. "What are these?" she said. "Plans," he said, "for a building." "Can I see?" He unrolled one on the kitchen table and weighted the corners with his coffee mug, a level, and 2 books. She looked at it for a long time without asking what anything meant. Then she pointed to a section near the foundation notation. "Why is this part thicker?" He looked at where she was pointing. He felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't known was clenched. "Because that's where the weight goes," he said. She nodded, like she had already suspected as much and was confirming it. On a Sunday evening in late October, Marcus Calloway stood on the back porch of his house with a glass of water and listened to the neighborhood settle into night. The air was cool and carried the smell of someone 3 houses down burning something in a fire pit. A dog was barking somewhere distant and then stopped. He thought about the man who had driven 4 states to be with a woman who was grieving something she had already moved past. He thought about 14 years of mornings with a $5 thermos and a window and the quiet that only happened before anyone else was awake. He thought about load tolerances, about what it had taken, all those years, to hold weight he hadn't known he was carrying. From inside the house came a sound. The specific sound of a child who has found something that interests her and is about to say so. "Dad," Imara called. "Come look at this." He went inside. He put down the glass. He turned toward the light. "I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like."